At 9 minutes after the chapel bell cracked, my own dead voice came over the vox and thanked me for entering the correct sum. I say dead voice not from a fondness for melodrama, though the Departamento Munitorum breeds melodrama of a very dry and fungal variety, but because the speaker identified himself with admirable administrative neatness as Lucian Harth, probatory clerk 2nd class, deceased, soul commended, effects unclaimed, ration card cancelled. This was discourteous. I had not yet died. I was seated at that hour in the casualty annex beneath the chapel of enumerated martyrs on the shrine world narthex, a damp and smoky little jewel of imperial piety whose chief exports were incense, relic bone, and widows. The chapel had once housed penitents. It had since been improved for clerks, which is to say the windows had been bricked, the pews removed, the walls painted the colour of old fat, and every sacred silence filled with the clicking of tally engines. Above us the faithful sang for victory. Below we counted the persons whom victory had already consumed. My office contained 3 desks, 7 red casualty ledgers, 1 devotional candle, and a vox set so ancient that it seemed less a machine than an elderly parishioner with electrical ailments. From it came the names of the fallen. I wrote them down. That was my station. I was trusted to count men, though not to question why men required such counting in quantities that defeated arithmetic and mercy alike. Narthax was under siege by a heretic congregation called the Pale Orison. They came out of the northern ash in white veils, walking behind carts of backward-playing hymns, smiling as if privy to a joke too impolite for the living. Against them stood the 113th Brontian Fusiliers, the Narthaxian Pious Reserve, 3 artillery batteries, a choir of 700 throats, and enough faith to make a rational man nervous. War to the soldier is noise, mud, obedience, terror, and the sudden discovery that one's body contains more blood than previously supposed. To the Munitorum, war is paper becoming heavier. For 11 days I recorded the dead. Baldwin Holt, private, chest perforation, unrecovered. Mara Venn, lance corporal, vaporized in artillery event, no remains. Sister Agatha of the Ashen Veil, throat wound, relic returned. Each life arrived reduced to 5 items: name, rank, regiment, manner of death, disposition of remains. A man may have courted, gambled, lied, sung, feared his mother, loved his enemy, and learned in his final instant that courage is mostly surprise. But in the ledger he must be made to fit the line provided. I was good at lines provided. That is why I lived long enough to deserve this confession. My fellow clerks were 2. Mistress Melis O'Drade, who had outlived 5 planetary governors and 3 sets of teeth, and Hesk Fell, a junior copyist with the constant look of a man listening to his own autopsy. O'Drade taught me the local habits of death. "Never trust a casualty report from the southern trenches," she said. "They are romantics. Every corpse becomes a last stand. Every missing sentry becomes a miracle. Cut their numbers by a 5th unless a commissar signs it. If a commissar signs it, add a 5th. Reports can lie?" I asked. "Harth, everything lies, even numbers, especially pious ones." On the 12th night, the first impossibility occurred. The vox coughed, not hissed, not sparked, but coughed, like a man waking inside a coffin. Hesk stopped writing. O'Drade opened one eye. I set down my stylus. A voice said, "Private Tom Arail, 1113th Brontian Fusiliers, deceased. I should like my gloves sent to my brother if there is one left." Hesk ran his finger down the current sheet. "Private Arail is alive," he whispered. "Forward Redoubt Caspian. Reported present at evening muster." The vox crackled again. "I am not alive now," said Private Arile, with the injured patience of a man correcting a child. "Please hurry, it is cold where the signal is." Ordrade seized the receiver and cut the channel. For one blessed moment, the NX returned to its ordinary music. Rain in the drains, shells in the distance, the tired tick of tally engines. Then all 7 casualty ledgers opened by themselves. I do not mean they fluttered in a draught. The air was still. I mean the red books opened, one after another, to blank pages, and upon those pages appeared, in wet black ink, 7 names. Private Tom Arail was the first. Ordrade stared at the page with the expression of a woman who has discovered a superior clerk inside the wall. "Fetch the confessor," she said. "Should we not fetch an engineer?" I asked. If a machine does something inexplicable, one fetches an engineer. If a book does something inexplicable, one fetches a priest. If a priest does something inexplicable, one fetches the Inquisition. We are still at the hopeful stage. Go. Confessor Malkin arrived in a cloud of incense and certainty. He was a tall, pale man with a black beard parted like curtains about a mouth that smiled only at suffering. When he heard the dead over the vox, he fell to his knees and declared a miracle. I suggested a malfunction. He told me, with great kindness, that a malfunction is merely a miracle awaiting ecclesiastical approval. At dawn, a patrol reached Forward Redoubt Caspian. It found 7 bodies beneath the second gun, exactly where the dead had said. Private Arail still wore his gloves. His brother, as it happened, was alive in the 44th Line Company. After that, the chapel became famous. The colonel wanted tactical intelligence. The confessor wanted proof of sanctity. The governor wanted reassurance that the city would not fall before his portrait could be evacuated. The commissariat wished to know whether a dead man could still be charged with cowardice. The engineers wished to remove the vox set, marry it to 12 diagnostic engines, anoint it in sacred unguents, and persuade it to become less interesting. Ordrade wanted a locked door and a transfer. I wanted, Emperor forgive me to understand. For 4 days the dead spoke. They named tunnel breaches, ammunition fires, plague signs, ambushes, heretic movements, and occasionally the small domestic agonies that cling to a soldier more faithfully than dog tags. A sergeant apologized to his wife for the daughter he had never met. A loader requested that no one tell his father he had died afraid. A drummer boy, 14 by the records and 12 by the sound of him, asked whether the emperor had many rooms. "He has all rooms," Confessor Malkin told the vox. "Then why," asked the boy, "is this one so dark?" Malkin did not include that exchange in his sermon. It is a dangerous thing when horror becomes useful. Men will endure any nightmare if it improves artillery correction. At first, the dead reported only what had happened. Then they reported what was happening. Then, on the 5th evening, they reported what had not happened yet. The voice belonged to Lance Corporal Edric Say. "Deceased," he said. "Time of death, 1906. Cause, shrapnel to the neck during assault on Pump House 9. I checked the chronometer. It was 1842. "Pump House 9 has not been assaulted," I said. "No," said Sayer. "Not yet." There was a silence in the annex of the sort one hears when a room full of men discover that a door is not where architecture promised it would be. Colonel Vane sent 3 squads to Pump House 9, added mortar cover, and ordered the assault advanced. At 1906, Lance Corporal Say died of shrapnel to the neck during the assault. The pump house was held. The colonel called it Providence. The confessor called it Grace. The soldiers called it luck, and were wise enough to distrust it. After that, each prediction became an order. Each order became a fact. The line between warning and command thinned until no honest man could say whether the dead foresaw the battle, or the living arranged the battle to flatter the dead. I should like to say that I resisted. It would sound well. I did not. I became efficient. The first false entry was mine. A voice came through at second bell, hoarse and young. Trooper Niall Vorse, Pious Reserve, deceased. Time of death, 2100. Cause, lass burn and trampling, Southgate retreat. I knew the name, not well. No one knew anyone well by then. But I had seen Voss in the plaza 2 mornings earlier, sharing a strip of candied root with a child whose mother lay under a grey sheet. He had the awkward kindness of a man who fears being observed in virtue. His voice over the vox was small. "Clerk," he said, "are you there?" I should not have answered. "I am." "Must I go to Southgate?" No doctrine covers the etiquette of answering a man who has heard his own death notice in advance. "Orders are orders," said Colonel Vane. "And ledgers are ledgers," said Confessor Malkine. I dipped my pen. On the red page, where the letters formed themselves, I found his line, "Voss, Niall, trooper, deceased." My hand moved with a speed that was not courage but irritation. I scratched out "deceased" and wrote, "Missing, presumed delayed." The vox screamed. All the candles in the annex bent sideways. Hesk fell to his knees. Confessor Malkine struck me so hard my lip opened. But at 2100, Niall Voss did not die at the South Gate. 16 others did. They brought Voss to us at midnight, alive, limping, and more frightened of my pen than of the enemy. His boot had split on the road to Southgate. He stopped to bind it. His squad went on. The gate collapsed beneath a retreating gun carriage, and 16 men were ground between iron and stone, where he should have been 17th. "You did that," he said. His accusation would have been easier to bear had it been anger. It was gratitude. By morning the ledgers had rewritten themselves. The 16 dead appeared under Voss's predicted time of death. Beside his name was a new annotation in red ink. Account unbalanced. No one liked that. I was confined to the annex, which was not as severe as it sounds. Most of my life had prepared me admirably for confinement. From my desk I watched the miracle harden into policy. The dead no longer merely reported. They bargained. Send the 4th Company east. Delay the artillery 7 minutes. Do not open the reliquary doors when the choir begins to sing. Sometimes obedience saved lives. Sometimes it merely arranged the dead in more convenient heaps. Colonel Vane grew thin. Confessor Malkine grew radiant. The governor stopped asking whether the city would survive, and began asking whether his name had come over the vox. It had not. This troubled him more than prophecy should trouble a sensible man. On the 7th night, the basilica shook from foundation to crown. The pale orison had brought forward a walking shrine made from fused pilgrim bones, a cathedral of ribs and loudspeakers, with a bell suspended in its chest. Every time the bell sounded, men in the trench forgot which side of the parapet they occupied. Some walked out to join the white-veiled congregation. Some shot their officers and apologized as they did it. Some sat down and began writing letters to childhood pets. The dead became frantic. Not the west guns. Flood the lower processional. The bell is not a bell. Do not let Malkine pray. That last message came in the voice of Sister Agatha, dead 3 days and already on her way to becoming a minor relic. Malkine heard it. His face changed. Until then he had worn holiness like armor. Now I saw underneath a small man terrified that God might speak in a tone he did not authorize. "The dead are being deceived," he said. "By whom?" asked Odrade. The vox answered in 700 voices, "By the living." That was when the Inquisition arrived. I had imagined an inquisitor would enter with thunder, flame, and a cloak designed to discourage irony. Interrogator Severian Holt, entered instead with 2 scribes, a servo skull, and a mild apology for the delay. He listened to the vox for 6 minutes. He read the ledgers for 9. He looked at me for rather longer than I enjoyed. "You changed an entry," he said. "Yes, Lord." "Why?" A dozen noble answers presented themselves and were dismissed as too decorative. "Because he asked." Holt nodded, as if this were either profound or very stupid, and I could not tell which verdict spared me. "We are going below," he said. "Below what?" asked Colonel Vane. The interrogator smiled faintly. "Below the miracle." The passage beneath the chapel had been sealed since the 36th millennium, which in the Imperium means either that it contains a holy secret, a dangerous machine, or a cupboard no department wishes to claim. An engineer opened it with a prayer, a cutting torch, and several remarks unsuitable for print. We descended. Holt, Malkine, Vane, Audrade, 2 stormtroopers, Neil Voss, myself, and the smell of every bad decision ever made underground. At the foot of the stair stood a lead door inscribed in High Gothic so old that even Malkine had to squint. Audrade translated first. "Here are kept those whose prayers were too loud." Behind the door was a chamber neither crypt nor engine room, though it had borrowed the worst habits of both. The floor was a mosaic of saints whose eyes had been replaced with brass sockets. Cables ran through those sockets like roots. In the center stood a cage of black iron, and within the cage sat 21 astropaths. They had been dead for centuries. They had also not stopped working. Their bodies sat in choir stalls, spines straight, hands folded, mouths sewn shut with gold wire. Copper halos circled their skulls. Above them hung the true relic of St. Orson, not the finger bone adored by pilgrims, but a jawbone set in crystal, clenched upon a strip of lead inscribed with names too small to read. The dead astropaths began to hum. It was not sound. My ears received it only because my mind had no better organ to sacrifice. I saw a sea without water, black and boiling, filled with lights that were ships, and mouths that were storms. I saw prayers launched like arrows and returning as worms. I saw the Emperor's distant radiance, not as a kindly sun, but as a white wound in the dark, immense, agonized, and refusing closure. Then the vision passed, and I was on the floor with blood on my cuffs. "What is this?" Colonel Vane demanded. "An emergency astropathic reliquary," said Holt. "A battlefield choir installed during an older war and forgotten when the records were purified. It has been catching death signals, last thoughts, battlefield vox, devotional traffic, and perhaps worse things for several thousand years. This siege woke it. Then it is not a miracle," said Vane. Malkine rose slowly. "You mistake the instrument for the player, and you mistake noise for music," said Holt. Then the walking shrine's bell sounded above us. Once, twice. On the third peal, the chamber lights failed. In the dark, every sewn mouth opened at once, snapping the gold thread. They spoke with my voice. "Lucian Harth, deceased. Time of death, pending correction. I have been insulted in Low Gothic, High Gothic, Binaric Static, and once by a rat with uncommon facial expression. But no insult equals hearing a choir of antique corpses schedule your demise." We returned to the annex as Orison's spire entered its last night. Every vox channel now carried the dead. They spoke over command, over prayer, over machine code, and, most distressingly, over the supper bell. There were no separate voices any longer. The dead had become a parliament, and like all parliaments it possessed many opinions and no body willing to accept responsibility. Open the west sluices. Shoot the bell. Do not shoot the bell. Send Voss below. Burn the ledgers. Account unbalanced. A shell struck the transept and filled the annex with saintly masonry. When the dust cleared, Mistress Odrade was dead. There was no drama in it. A stone cherub had fallen upon her with the efficient vulgarity of gravity. She lay beside the ledgers, one hand still on the iron chest, her face composed in mild annoyance. It seemed unfair that a woman who had survived 5 planetary governors should be ended by devotional architecture. The vox crackled. Ordrade Melis. Senior casualty clerk, deceased. Cause, impact by Puto. Advice to successor, trust no corrected total. Even then, I nearly laughed. God forgive me. Perhaps he did. Perhaps he has better taste than his servants. Her death settled something in me, not courage. Courage is too clean a word. It was more a failure of obedience, like a worn gear slipping at last from its appointed teeth. I opened the iron chest. The ledgers inside were warm. Every page was full now, not merely with the dead of Narthax, but with columns beyond counting, names from regiments not present, worlds I had never heard of, ships not yet launched, children not yet born, all marked with dates, causes, dispositions, corrections. The casualty ledgers were not predicting a battle. They were rehearsing a civilization. I found my own name on page 712, Lucian Harth, probatory clerk, 2nd class, deceased. Cause, voluntary data immolation. Disposition, no remains. Comment, account closed. Beside it in smaller red script, another line appeared, optional. That, more than the death notice, chilled me. The Imperium kills billions by order, famine, zeal, error, and arithmetic. But it rarely admits a death is optional. Neil Voss stood beside me. "Can you change it?" he asked. "I changed yours. And 16 died. Yes. Then change something larger." It was a profoundly foolish suggestion, which is to say it was the first wise thing said all night. We carried the ledgers below. No one stopped us. Everyone was occupied with nobler disasters. The basilica shook. Bells rang above and beneath. Heskfell called after me once from the stairs. I wish I had said something memorable. Instead I said, "Keep the ink dry." In the reliquary chamber, the astropaths spoke in a storm of last messages. Name them, count them, do not let them be missing, do not let them be forgotten. Do not let them be useful. Interrogator Holt found us there. He held a pistol, but did not raise it. "You intend to burn the ledgers," he said. "I intend to balance them." There is no balance. There is only service. Then service has become a synonym for disposal. Above us the walking shrine's bell tolled again. Dust rained from the ceiling. "If those books are destroyed," Holt said, "we lose a weapon that can save this city. If those books survive," I said, "the city may be saved only so it can continue feeding the books." He considered this. Then he stepped aside. Confessor Malkin shot him. The shot struck Holt beneath the ribs. He fell without theatrical assistance, which is how one knows a wound is serious. Malkin emerged from the stair arch with a face transfigured by certainty. Certainty is the most dangerous expression a man can wear. It permits him to be a monster without feeling underdressed. "No more corrections," he said. "The dead have spoken." "The dead," said Niall Voss, "have mostly complained." It was an excellent final remark. Malkin shot him through the chest. Voss fell against the iron cage. The astropaths shrieked. His blood ran along the mosaic and filled the brass eye sockets of the saints. All the cables convulsed. 7 floors above us, the old Vox set howled loud enough to split the chapel bell. I caught Voss as he slid down. He looked surprised, as if death had been a clerk he had hoped to avoid by changing cues. "Am I counted?" he whispered. I looked at the ledger. His name trembled on the page, unsure of itself. "Not yet," I said. "Then be quick." Malkin advanced with pistol and relic knife. Behind him, St. Orson's jawbone rose from its crystal case, teeth chattering around the lead strip. The confessor smiled as if vindicated. "Behold," he said, "the saint." The jawbone spoke. Not in thunder, not in holy music. It spoke in the dry, irritated voice of Mistress O'Drade. "Oh, sit down, Malkin." Had the Emperor himself descended and requested a chair, I could not have been more astonished. Malkin froze. It was enough. I threw the first ledger into the brazier beneath the cage. The fire turned blue. Every name in the book rose as smoke. Not letters, but faces. Thousands upon thousands, brief as sparks, each appearing with the startled dignity of a person finding himself remembered in a room he had never entered. They streamed upward into the cables, into the astropaths, into the jawbone, into the vox, into whatever dark sea lies beyond hearing. Malkin fired. The round struck my shoulder. It hurt less than I expected, then rather more than I preferred. I threw the second ledger after the first. Voss, dying with commendable industry, pushed the third with his boot. Above us the battlefield changed. The dead ceased giving orders. The vox cleared. For the first time in 8 days, Colonel Vane had to command without prophecy. He did so with profanity, guesswork, and human terror, those 3 reliable pillars of imperial warfare. The west guns fired not because the dead requested it, but because a gunner named Ilya Dawn saw the walking shrine through smoke and decided she disliked its posture. Her shell struck the bell. The bell cracked. The pale orison stopped singing. In the chamber below I burned the books until the fire blistered my hands. Malkin tried to drag the fourth away. Interrogator Holt, bleeding and very pale, shot him from the floor with discourteous accuracy. The confessor fell beside the saint's jawbone. It bit him. I mention this because history is too often deprived of its better details. When the last ledger burned, the astropaths became still. The chamber exhaled. I heard, very far away, the sound of surf upon a shore no map would admit. Niall Voss was gone. His body remained in my arms, but the man himself, the unsettled account, the trooper who had been missing, presumed delayed, seemed to have departed with the smoke of the ledgers. His face was calm. The phrase is used too easily around corpses, yet it was true. He looked like a man excused at last from parade. I opened the small black correction book. There was one line left. Lucian Harth, deceased. Cause, voluntary data immolation. Disposition, no remains. Comment, account closed. My hand shook so badly I could scarcely hold the stylus. I crossed out deceased. I wrote witness. The chamber went dark. I awoke in the plaza beneath dawn, which was inconsiderate of the dawn, as it had not been invited to survive. Orison spire still stood. The basilica had lost its western transept, 3 towers, most of its windows, and all of its confidence. The statue of the emperor remained above the nave, though one hand had fallen and now pointed not to the horizon, but to the casualty tents. I am not theologian enough to interpret this. I am clerk enough to notice it. The pale orison had broken when their bell cracked. Without its hymn they were merely traitors, and traitors, though troublesome, are easier to kill than theology. The official record states that Orison Spire was saved by the martyrdom of Confessor Malkin, the tactical brilliance of Colonel Vane, the steadfastness of the 113th Brontian Fusiliers, and a minor but sanctified Vox anomaly subsequently purified by flame. Mistress Audrade received a commendation. Interrogator Holt received a sealed recovery order. Niall Voss received nothing, as there was no longer any record of him, nor, strictly speaking, of me. My ration card was cancelled. My berth reassigned, my pay stopped, which grieved me more in principle than in amount. Heskfell looked directly at me in the casualty annex and asked if anyone had felt a draught. When I spoke, he shivered and crossed himself, but did not answer. I had become administratively dead and physically inconvenient. On the fourth day, Holt found me in the ruined chapel of enumerated martyrs. He looked older by several decades, which improved him. A brace supported his side. His eyes were less clear. "You are difficult to file," he said. "I have been called worse." Not officially. He gave me a data slate. Record what happened. Names if you remember them. Not strategy. Not theology. Names. "Why?" He looked up at the Emperor's broken hand. "Because I am beginning to suspect that the difference between a man and a resource is whether anyone bothers to remember him incorrectly." That was nearly wise, and coming from the Inquisition, extravagant. So I record this now. Private Tom Arail, who wanted his gloves sent home. Lance Corporal Edric Say, who told us to shoot the bell. Sister Agatha, who warned us not to let Malkine pray. Mistress Malus O'Drade, who trusted no corrected total. Hesk Fell, who kept the ink dry. Niall Voss, who was missing, presumed delayed, and who bought 16 men a little more truth than the ledger wished to pay. As for Lucian Harth, probatory clerk, 2nd class, I can offer no certainty. The records say he died. My wounds say otherwise. The mirror refuses arbitration. There is one final matter. Since the burning of the ledgers, all Vox traffic from Narthax has included, beneath speech and static, a faint sound like pages turning. Most operators cannot hear it. Those who can are reassigned. Those who write down what they hear are thanked for their service and removed from the rolls. Last night, as I prepared this testimony, my private receiver woke without power. A voice said, very softly, "Account unbalanced." It was not the voice of the dead astropaths. It was not Malkine, nor Voss, nor Audrade, nor any soldier whose name I knew. It was a deeper thing, patient as dust, vast as an archive, and amused by locks. I asked, because one should be polite to damnation, "Who speaks?" The answer came after a long pause. The remainder. There are footsteps in the corridor now. They may be Holt's men. They may be mine. They may be only the old building settling into another century of useful lies. I have placed this slate behind the 17th brass plate on the east wall, beneath the names carved too small for pilgrims to read. If you have found it, do not trust the official account. Do not trust this one entirely either. I was a clerk, after all, and we are trained to make disaster legible. But if ever your Vox whispers your name before battle, answer no roll call spoken from the dark. And if a ledger writes your death before you have lived it, for the love of the Emperor, spill the ink.